Well, let's get the latest now from Bob Ward. He is the Policy and Communications Director at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment at London School of Economics. Thank you very much for joining us on the News Hour. Now, we can all see the pictures of what's happening, but looking at the science behind this, why is it happening? And also, what are governments now thinking about? What can they do about this? Because this extreme weather is not going away. In fact, it's becoming more frequent.
Yes, that's right. So many of these countries are used to having wildfire seasons in the summer, but these seasons are now longer and the fires are more intense. And that's due to the fact that the higher temperatures are drying out the ground much more quickly, so that when a fire starts, and the fire could be either natural through a lightning strike or caused by humans, but once the fire starts, it spreads very quickly, particularly if there are winds. And this, I'm afraid, is the price we are paying for having been too slow to respond to scientists' warnings about climate change. It's being driven by our emissions of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide from the use of fossil fuels. And until the world gets its emissions down essentially to zero, it will just get worse. All of these things are going to become more frequent and more intense. And that's why we have to focus on getting to net zero emissions as a world as quickly as possible.
No country is prepared for this kind of destruction with the best will in the world. But as you say, this is an irreversible trend now, or you think it could be realistically brought down?
Well, we're not going to be able to reverse it straight away. The best we can hope for is to stop it getting any worse. And that will only happen when we get to net zero emissions. And the earliest date that's being discussed for that is 2050, which means that for the next 2 or 3 decades, it's just going to get worse. And we're going to have to learn to cope with this. Remember, it's not just wildfires, it's the heat waves themselves. The heat waves killed more than 60,000 people last summer across Europe. It's flooding because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture, and so when it rains harder. There's coastal flooding due to sea level rise. All of these are consequences because we just didn't respond quickly enough to what the scientists were warning us about, and now we are living through the consequences.
And are we going to see these kind of impacts in every season, not just perhaps the summer?
Yeah, you can see the fingerprint of climate change across all the seasons. In winter, for instance, particularly in Northern Europe, you see more instances of flooding because you get the heavier rainfall. You're seeing many areas that are used to having snow and ice. That's disappearing now. You know, mountain glaciers are disappearing. In spring, there are some positive effects where you end up with growing seasons for crops starting earlier, but then the intensity of the summer, if you have a lack of rain and you have high temperatures, often kill crops. So overall, all these impacts are bad news for us. They're bad news for humans, and they're also bad news for plants and animals as well, because they also can't cope with this extreme weather, which is now worse than probably the Earth has seen for at least, say, 100,000 years. So it really is something that we haven't experienced in our recent past.
OK, Bob Ward from the London School of Economics, thank you.